The Amazon River has no single beginning. For more than 400 years, explorers, cartographers, and scientists have argued over where it starts. 5 different tributaries in the mountains of Peru have been named its source. Each claim was later challenged. Each map was later revised. To this day, the exact length of the river remains, in the words of the Encyclopedia Britannica, open to interpretation and continued debate. It is the greatest river on Earth by almost every measure. It carries 1/5 of all the fresh water that moves across the surface of the planet. Its discharge into the Atlantic is greater than the next 7 largest rivers combined. At its mouth, the river is more than 300 kilometers wide. The island that sits in that mouth, Marajó, is the size of Switzerland. And yet no one can agree on how long it is or where it begins. More than 1,100 tributaries feed into it. Some of those tributaries are themselves among the largest rivers in the world. The basin they drain covers 7 million square kilometers, an area larger than the entire European Union, spanning 9 countries, 3,344 indigenous territories, and more than 30 million people. 1 in 10 known species on Earth lives here. The river itself is an ocean in disguise. At its widest point during the wet season, the main channel stretches so far that standing on one bank, you cannot see the other. The mouth, where the river meets the Atlantic, pushes fresh water more than 160 kilometers out to sea. Sailors in the age of exploration reported drinking fresh water from the ocean before they could see land. The island of Marajó, which sits in the river's mouth like a cork that does not quite fit, is larger than many European countries. It is home to water buffalo, brought from Asia in the 19th century, that now roam its flooded grasslands in herds numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Island floods so completely in the rainy season that its inhabitants build their homes on stilts and move between them by canoe. How does a river this large resist being fully measured? And what is it about the Amazon that has defeated every attempt to pin it down? The answer begins not with water, but with soil. For most of the 20th century, scientists believed the Amazon rainforest was a pristine wilderness, untouched, primordial, a place where human civilization had never taken root because the soil was too poor to support it. The nutrients in the Amazon are not in the ground. They are in the trees. Strip the forest, and the earth beneath it is thin, acidic, and nearly barren. That understanding began to unravel in the 1960s, when researchers started finding something that should not have existed: patches of deep, dark, extraordinarily fertile soil scattered across the basin. The soil was black, rich with charcoal, broken pottery, fish bones, and organic matter. It was 2 to 3 times more nutrient-dense than the surrounding earth. They called it terra preta, black earth. Terra preta was not natural. It was made. Created by people who lived here between 450 BCE and 950 CE. Generations of farmers who mixed charcoal, compost, bones, and manure into the rain-leached soil to make it hold nutrients. The charcoal bound minerals in place. The pottery shards created air pockets for roots. The result was a soil so resilient that it remains fertile today, more than 1,000 years after the people who made it disappeared. And they did not make it in small quantities. Recent estimates suggest Terra Preta may cover more than 3% of the entire Amazon basin. Some researchers put the figure at 10%, an area twice the size of Great Britain. It is not found in random patches. It follows the courses of major rivers. It clusters on bluffs overlooking floodplains. It appears in patterns that suggest not scattered villages, but networks of settlements. In 1541, a Spanish soldier named Francisco de Orellana became the first European to travel the length of the Amazon. He reported something extraordinary: densely populated regions stretching hundreds of kilometers along the river, large villages, organized farms, roads. He described warriors, cities, and a civilization sophisticated enough to field armies. For centuries, his account was dismissed as fantasy. The Amazon could not support cities. The soil would not allow it. But Orellana was not lying. He was simply early. Francisco de Orellana did not set out to find the Amazon. He set out to find cinnamon. In 1541, Orellana was part of a larger Spanish expedition led by Gonzalo Pizarro, brother of the conqueror of the Inca, searching the eastern slopes of the Andes for La Canela, the legendary land of cinnamon trees. The expedition was a disaster. Hundreds of indigenous porters died. Supplies ran out. The jungle offered nothing the Spanish could eat. Pizarro sent Orellana downriver with a small group to find food. He never came back. What followed was one of the most extraordinary journeys in the history of exploration. Orellana and his men, roughly 50 soldiers, built a crude boat and floated east. For 8 months they drifted, fought, starved, and mapped. They passed through territories of peoples they had never encountered. At one point, they were attacked by warriors they described as women, fierce, tall, and leading the charge. Orellana named the river after the Amazons of Greek myth. August 24th, 1542. They reached the Atlantic Ocean. They have traveled more than 4,000 miles through the interior of a continent no European has ever crossed. Orellana's account described something that did not fit the European understanding of the tropics. He spoke of settlements so large and so continuous that it took days to pass through them. He described roads leading inland from the river. He reported farms, fishing weirs, and food stores. In one stretch, he claimed the villages were so close together they formed a single continuous settlement along the banks. He was describing a civilization. And no one believed him. The Portuguese explorer Pedro Teixeira traveled the same route in reverse in 1637, nearly a century later. He found almost nothing. The river was quiet. The banks were empty. The cities Orellana described were gone. It took nearly 500 years for science to prove that Orellana was telling the truth. Within decades of European contact, smallpox, measles, and influenza swept through the basin. An estimated 90 to 99% of the indigenous population died. Entire civilizations, their languages, their knowledge, their cities, vanished within a generation. When later explorers returned to the same stretches of river, they found nothing but forest. The trees had swallowed everything. What the trees did not swallow was the soil, and in the 21st century, a technology called LIDAR, laser scanning from aircraft, began to see through the canopy for the first time. Beneath the forest floor in Bolivia, researchers found conical pyramids, complex water management systems, and cities. In Ecuador's Upano Valley, they uncovered dense urban centers with thousands of homes, plazas, and road networks. Across the Brazilian state of Acre, deforestation revealed enormous geometric earthworks, circles, squares, and hexagons carved into the ground, dating from the 1st century to 1250 CE. The Amazon was not empty before Europeans arrived. It was home to millions of people who shaped the forest itself. A study of more than 1,000 research plots across the basin found that 20 of the most common tree species in the Amazon are domesticated, planted, tended, and spread by human hands over millennia. Half of all trees in the Amazon belong to just 227 species. Many of them are palms, fruit trees, and nut-bearing species that ancient peoples cultivated. The forest is not a wilderness. It is a garden whose gardeners were killed. And the soil they made, the terra preta, still works. Farmers in the modern Amazon seek it out. They know where to find it. They plant on it because nothing else in the basin grows as well. 1,000 years after the last hands shaped it, the black earth endures. But the Amazon is not only a story told in soil. It is a story told in water, in rivers so different from one another that when they meet, they refuse to merge. 10 kilometers east of Manaus, a city of more than 2 million people in the heart of the Brazilian Amazon, two of the world's largest rivers collide. The Rio Negro, black as tea, arrives from the Colombian highlands carrying almost no sediment. Its color comes from dissolved plant matter, the stain of millions of rotting leaves. It is warm, slow, and acidic. The Rio Solimões arrives from the opposite direction, having traveled more than 1,600 kilometers from the foothills of the Andes. It is coffee-colored, thick with sand and silt scraped from the mountains. It is cooler by 6 degrees. It moves at twice the speed. Its chemistry is nearly neutral. Where these two rivers meet, they do not blend. They flow side by side within the same channel, one black, one tan, for 6 kilometers. The boundary between them is so sharp, it is visible from space. A geologist once described the scale of it as 6 Mississippis of cafe au lait-colored water converging with 2 Mississippis of black tea-colored water. The difference in temperature, speed, density, and pH creates a physical barrier between them. They resist each other. They flow together, but separately, for kilometers, before the faster, denser water of the Solimões finally overwhelms the Negro, and the two become one. The Brazilians call it the Encontro das Águas, the meeting of the waters. It is not the only confluence like this in the Amazon. At Santarém, the Amazon meets the turquoise Tapajós. At Tefe, at Parintins, at Coari, dark and light waters meet and hold apart. But none is as large or as dramatic as this one, and none sits beside a city with a story as strange as Manaus. But the Amazon's water holds another secret, one that even the people who live beside it rarely see in full. For half of every year, the river rises, not by centimeters, by meters. In the central Amazon, the water level can fluctuate by more than 14 meters between dry season and wet season. When the river rises, it does not stay within its banks. It floods the surrounding forest. The Várzea, the seasonally flooded forest, is a world that appears and disappears annually. For months, the forest floor lies beneath 3, 5, even 10 meters of water. Fish swim between tree trunks. Dolphins navigate through the canopy. Entire ecosystems exist in a state of perpetual reinvention. Species adapted not to one environment, but to two. When the water recedes, it leaves behind a layer of nutrient-rich sediment from the Andes, the same sediment that makes the Solimois brown. This annual deposit makes the Várzea some of the most fertile land in the Amazon. It is why the largest human settlements, historically and today, cluster along the main river channels. The Várzea is also why Iquitos exists where it does, and why no road has ever reached it. And the Amazon's hydrological strangeness does not end at its own basin. In southern Venezuela, a natural canal called the Cassiquiare connects the Amazon River system to the Orinoco, the other great river of South America. It is the largest natural canal on Earth, and it flows in both directions depending on the season. Water from the Orinoco basin drains into the Amazon. The two greatest river systems of the continent are joined. When Alexander von Humboldt traveled the Cassiquiare in 1800, most European geographers refused to believe such a thing could exist. Two major river basins, connected by a natural waterway, violated everything they understood about how rivers worked. The Amazon, as usual, did not conform to the map. Manaus should not exist where it does. It sits 900 miles inland from the Atlantic coast, surrounded on every side by rainforest, accessible only by river or by air. There is no road that connects it to the rest of Brazil without seasonal flooding cutting it off. And yet, in the 1890s, it was one of the wealthiest cities on Earth. The source of that wealth was a single tree, the Pará rubber tree, Hevea brasiliensis. When harvesters cut V-shaped notches into its bark, the tree bleeds a white sap that can be refined into latex. And in the age of industrialization, latex was everything. Tires, hoses, gaskets, waterproof clothing, telegraph cable insulation. The modern world ran on rubber, and all of it came from the Amazon. Manaus was at the center of the trade. Money poured in faster than anyone could spend it. The rubber barons of Manaus lived in a delirium of wealth. Historian Robin Furneaux wrote that no extravagance, however absurd, could deter them. If one baron bought a vast yacht, another installed a tame lion in his villa. A third watered his horse with French champagne. The city had electric streetlights before most of Europe. It had 16 miles of streetcar tracks, a telephone system, and a floating port that rose and fell with the river's 14-meter seasonal flood. And then they built an opera house. Construction began in 1884. The Teatro Amazonas took 15 years to complete, with several pauses due to outbreaks of yellow fever. The architects imported Carrara marble from Italy for the stairs and columns, Scottish steel for the walls, Alsatian ceramic tiles for the dome, 36,000 of them hand-painted in the colors of the Brazilian flag. The chandeliers came from Murano. The furniture came from France. The curtain, painted in Paris, depicted the meeting of the waters. It opened on January 7th, 1897, with a performance of La Gioconda by Amilcare Ponchielli. In one season, half the members of a visiting opera troupe died of yellow fever. But the opera house was built on suffering as much as on rubber. The latex did not harvest itself. Indigenous peoples across the basin were enslaved to bleed the trees. In the Putumayo region, along the border of Colombia and Peru, the Peruvian Amazon company subjected tens of thousands of indigenous workers to forced labor, torture, and murder. The worst of the atrocities occurred along the Putumayo River. The Peruvian Amazon company, a British-registered firm, controlled the rubber trade in the region. Its overseers enforced production quotas through systematic terror. Indigenous workers, primarily Witoto, Bora, and Andoki peoples, were held in conditions of slavery. Those who failed to meet their quotas were flogged, starved, or mutilated. Reports described workers chained to trees, children held hostage, women taken as concubines. The death toll is estimated in the tens of thousands. In 1910, the British consul Roger Casement, the same man who had previously exposed atrocities in the Belgian Congo, traveled to the Putumayo to investigate. His report, published in 1912, confirmed the worst of the allegations. It described a system of forced labor indistinguishable from slavery, maintained by violence so routine it had become administrative. The world was briefly horrified. The Peruvian Amazon company was dissolved. But the damage had been done. Entire peoples had been decimated, and the rubber barons of Manaus had built their opera house with the profits. The rubber boom was wealth extracted from the forest and from the bodies of the people who lived in it. And then it ended. In 1876, a British adventurer named Henry Wickham had smuggled 70,000 rubber seeds out of the Amazon and delivered them to Kew Gardens in London. The seeds were germinated, shipped to Southeast Asia, and planted in vast, orderly plantations. Within decades, Malaysian rubber undercut Brazilian prices. The Amazon's monopoly collapsed. Manaus went bankrupt. The opera house closed. It stood empty for nearly 90 years. A pink and white palace, rotting in the tropical heat, its chandeliers dark, its stage silent. It reopened in 1997 after a multi-million-dollar renovation. Today, performances are free. The state funds the Amazonas Philharmonic. South Korean baritones sing Wagner in German to audiences of Portuguese speakers. School children tour the building. A large screen in the plaza outside broadcasts performances to anyone who cannot get a seat. The opera house survived the boom. It survived the bust. It survived 90 years of abandonment. And now it belongs to everyone. But not all inhabitants of the Amazon basin walk on two legs. Somewhere in the flooded forests below Manaus, a shape moves through the murky water, pale pink, almost ghostly, surfacing with a slow, deliberate breath before slipping back beneath. The surface. The boto. The Amazon river dolphin. The only true river dolphin in the Western Hemisphere, its skin is pink, not white, not grey, pink. The color deepening as the animal ages. Its neck vertebrae are unfused, allowing it to turn its head in ways no ocean dolphin can, navigating between submerged tree trunks in the seasonally flooded forest. Indigenous peoples across the basin tell the same story in different languages. The boto, they say, transforms at night. It becomes a handsome man dressed in white who walks into villages during festivals, seduces women, and disappears by dawn. Children born without a known father are sometimes called children of the boto. The boto's numbers are declining. Mercury from illegal gold mining accumulates in the fish it eats. Hydroelectric dams fragment its habitat. In 2023, more than 100 river dolphins were found dead in a single lake during an unprecedented drought. Water temperatures had reached 39 degrees Celsius. The boto has lived in these waters for millions of years. Whether it will survive the next 50 depends on decisions being made right now. In Brasilia, in Beijing, in boardrooms, the dolphin will never see. In the Vazia forests, south of Manaus, where the water runs dark beneath the submerged trees, a shadow moves along the waterline, silent, deliberate, and low. The jaguar, Panthera onca, the largest cat in the Americas and the third largest on Earth. In most of its range, the jaguar is a creature of the forest floor, but in the Amazon, it is also a creature of the water. Unlike nearly every other big cat on Earth, the jaguar swims. It hunts caiman, the Amazon's crocodilians, by leaping onto their backs in the shallows and biting through the skull. Its jaws exert more force relative to its size than those of any other large cat. While lions and tigers kill by suffocation, the jaguar kills by puncturing the skull or the spine. One bite. In the flooded forest, jaguars have been documented climbing trees to hunt, waiting on branches above the waterline, then dropping onto prey passing below. They eat fish, turtles, capybaras, deer, and virtually anything else that moves. The jaguar once ranged from the southern United States to Argentina. It has lost more than half of its historical territory. In the Amazon, it survives in large numbers only in unbroken tracts of forest, the same tracts now under pressure from cattle ranching, soy farming, and road construction. To indigenous peoples across the basin, the jaguar is not simply an animal. It is a spiritual force. Shamans speak of transforming into jaguars. The Olmec and Maya of Central America built entire cosmologies around it. In the Amazon, the jaguar is the forest's other consciousness, the one that watches from the dark while you sleep. Where the jaguar persists, the forest is still deep enough to hold its oldest residents. Where it vanishes, the forest is already diminished, even if the trees are still standing. South of Manaus, the river widens. The forest stretches to the horizon in every direction. From the air, the canopy looks unbroken, an ocean of green, featureless, and infinite. But the Amazon is not featureless, and it is not infinite. The numbers are difficult to hold in the mind. 2.5 million species of insects, 40,000 species of plants, 2,200 species of fish, more than in the entire Atlantic Ocean, 1,294 species of birds, 427 species of mammals. A single quarter-square-kilometer patch of Ecuadorian Amazon was found to contain more than 1,100 tree species, more than exist in all of North America. Every year, researchers discover species that have never been documented. In 2024, scientists identified a new species of green anaconda, potentially the largest snake on Earth, that had been hiding in plain sight, genetically distinct from its known relatives. 1 in 10 known species on Earth lives in this forest. But the number that remains unknown is almost certainly larger than the number that has been catalogued. The Amazon is not just unmapped geographically, it is unmapped biologically. In the rivers themselves, an underwater world operates by rules the surface cannot see. The Amazon basin contains more species of freshwater fish than any other river system on Earth, more than 2,200 documented, with new species described every year. Some of these fish have adapted to conditions that seem impossible. The arapaima, known locally as the pirarucu or paiche, is one of the largest freshwater fish alive. It can reach 3 meters in length and weigh more than 200 kilograms. It is an obligate air breather. Despite living in water, it must surface every 10 to 20 minutes to gulp air, or it drowns. Its scales are so tough that indigenous peoples use them as nail files. Researchers have discovered that the scales are composed of a corrugated collagen structure that makes them resistant to piranha bites, a natural armor developed over millions of years of co-evolution with predators. The black waters of the Rio Negro, the same waters that flow past Manaus and refuse to mix with the Solimões, are so acidic that they support almost no mosquitoes. The indigenous peoples who live along its banks have known this for centuries. The white waters of the Solimões, by contrast, are rich enough to breed them in clouds. 2 rivers flowing side by side, producing 2 entirely different experiences of human life. The candiru, the electric eel, the red-bellied piranha. The Amazon's reputation for danger is built on real species with real adaptations. But the danger is overstated, and the wonder is understated. For every predator in these waters, there are hundreds of species that exist quietly, unnamed, uncounted, filling ecological roles that science has not yet described. A 2013 study estimated that half of all individual trees in the Amazon, roughly 195 billion trees, belong to just 227 hyper-dominant species. The other half belong to approximately 15,773 rarer species, many of which are found in only a few scattered locations. Some of these species may exist in populations so small that a single logging concession could eliminate them entirely before anyone has recorded their name. And deep within the parts of the basin that remain most remote, in the Vale do Javari, along the Brazilian-Peruvian border, in Colombia's Rio Puré National Park, in the forests of Ecuador's Yasuni, there are people who have chosen never to be mapped at all. Brazil alone is believed to contain more than 100 uncontacted indigenous groups. They are not lost. They are not unaware of the outside world. They hear the planes that fly over their territories daily. They find the equipment left behind by loggers and miners. They know what lies beyond the forest. They have chosen not to go there. Their isolation is not primordial. It is a decision, made generations ago, reinforced by memory and rooted in violence. Most uncontacted groups in the Amazon are believed to be descendants of peoples who fled deeper into the forest during the rubber boom, escaping enslavement, massacre, and epidemic disease. Their ancestors watched what contact brought. Their descendants chose distance. In Colombia's southern Amazon, between the Caquetá and Putumayo rivers, lies Rio Puré National Park, 2.47 million acres of dense jungle intersected by muddy rivers, inhabited by jaguars and wild peccaries, and, researchers believed, by people no outsider had ever photographed. For more than 20 years, a Colombian political scientist named Roberto Franco searched for them. He interviewed hunters, missionaries, and indigenous communities along the rivers. He pieced together decades of fragmented reports, footprints, abandoned shelters, stories of people glimpsed and then gone. In 2010, Franco and park administrator Luz Marina Martinez flew over the park in a small plane. They carried a topographical map and little expectation. Finding an uncontacted group from the air in a forest this dense was like searching for a needle in a haystack. They found rectangular malokas with rounded ends and 3 indigenous people, Yuris and Pases, standing in the open. The first photographs ever taken of Colombia's last uncontacted tribes. The Yuris and Pases had been considered extinct since the late 19th century. They were not extinct, they had simply gone deeper. During the rubber atrocities, they fled the river systems where they had lived for centuries and vanished into the forest between 2 rivers. They call outsiders Cariba Malo, bad white man. In 2014, Roberto Franco died in an accident over the forests of Caqueta. He
never completed his work,
but the protections he helped establish remain in place. Colombian law guarantees the rights of uncontacted peoples to remain in isolation, to live freely on their ancestral lands. Whether those guarantees hold depends on enforcement. Drug traffickers have built runways in the park. Illegal miners push closer every year. The people Franco photographed, fewer than 100 families, survive not because of law, but because the forest is still thick enough to hide them. In Brazil's Rondônia state, a man lived alone on 8,000 hectares of forest for nearly 30 years. No one knew his name. No one knew his language. No one knew the people he belonged to. They had been massacred by ranchers in the 1970s and 1980s. He was the last one. He dug deep holes in the ground, for hiding, for trapping animals. He refused every attempt at contact. He became known as the Man of the Hole. In August 2022, he was found dead in his hammock, in a dwelling he had built himself. He appeared to have died of natural causes. With him died his language, his memories, and the entire history of a people whose name the world will never know. Far below the canopy, invisible from the air, a column moves through the leaf litter in a line so organized it looks engineered. Leafcutter ants, Atta cephalotes. Each worker carries a piece of leaf many times its own body weight, cut with mandibles sharp enough to slice through tough tropical foliage. They are not eating the leaves, they are farming them. Deep underground, in chambers spanning 30 meters, the ants cultivate a fungus that exists nowhere else on Earth, a species so dependent on the ants that it cannot survive without them. The ants feed it with chewed leaf pulp. The fungus breaks down the cellulose. The ants eat the fungus. This agricultural system is more than 50 million years old. It predates human farming by roughly 49,990,000 years. A single colony can contain 8 million individuals, organized into castes as rigidly specialized as any factory. Soldiers, foragers, gardeners, waste managers, nursery workers. The colony's underground network may contain more than 1,000 chambers. Their excavation moves 40 tons of soil. They are, by biomass and by engineering output, the Amazon's most successful species. They were here before the first humans crossed into South America. They will almost certainly be here after the last ones leave. At the western edge of the basin, the land rises. The rivers narrow. The forest gives way to cloud and altitude. And the Amazon's most persistent mystery begins. The question of where the Amazon starts has been argued for more than 400 years. It is not a question of ignorance. It is a question of definition. What makes a source a source? The farthest point upstream? The tributary with the most water? The stream that flows year-round? Different answers yield different rivers. The first European to attempt an answer was a Czech Jesuit priest named Samuel Fritz. In the 1690s, Fritz was running a chain of 40 mission villages among the Omaguas people along the upper Amazon. In 1689, he fell gravely ill and was carried downriver to the Portuguese settlement at Belém, a journey of months. The Portuguese, suspecting espionage, detained him for 22 months. During his captivity and his eventual return upriver, Fritz mapped the entire course of the Amazon, by hand, from personal observation, supplemented by information from indigenous informants. His 1707 map was the first comprehensive chart of the river system ever produced. It remained the most accurate source available for decades after his death. Fritz identified the Marañón River as the Amazon's source, a powerful tributary originating at Lake Loricocha in the high Andes. For most of the 18th and 19th centuries, the Marañón held the title. It contributed the most water. It was the first major tributary encountered when traveling upstream. It felt like the beginning, but it was not the farthest point. In the 20th century, as aerial photography and geodetic surveys opened the Andes to closer study, attention shifted south. The Ucayali River, a lower extension of the Apurimac, appeared to stretch farther into the mountains than the Marañón. If length, not volume, defined a source, the Apurimac was the answer. October 15th, 1971. Lauren McIntyre, a National Geographic explorer, reaches a glacial stream on the northern slope of Nevado Mismi, a snow-capped peak in southern Peru, 5,319 meters above sea level, barely 100 miles from the Pacific Ocean. He identifies a small lake fed by meltwater as the headwaters of the Apurimac, and therefore the ultimate source of the Amazon. A follow-up expedition in 2000 confirmed the finding. For 40 years, the matter appeared settled. It was not settled. In 2014, professional kayaker James Kontos and anthropologist Nicholas Tripsevich published a study in the journal Area that upended the consensus. Using GPS tracking, satellite imagery, and 6 different methods of measurement, they demonstrated that the Mantaro River, another Andean tributary, is roughly 10% longer than the Apurimac. The Mantaro had been overlooked for a simple reason. A sharp, twisting bend in its lower half makes it look much shorter on a map than it actually is. No one had measured around the kink. But there was a problem. The Mantaro does not flow year-round. A dam built in 1974 diverts its water for part of the year, leaving a section of the riverbed dry for 5 months. If you define a source as the farthest point from which water flows continuously to the sea, the Mantaro fails the test. Kontos and Tripsevich disagreed. They argued that the most distant source should be defined as the farthest point from which a drop of rain will eventually make its way to the river's mouth, regardless of whether it flows every day of the year. A man-made dam, they said, should not disqualify a river that has been flowing for millions of years. The Smithsonian's Andrew Johnston, who had been on the expedition that confirmed the Apurimac, called the new study a fresh perspective. National Geographic's Juan Valdez was less convinced. Continuously flowing water, he said, is what defines a source. Without it, the point is moot. No consensus was reached, none has been reached since. And so, the Amazon remains a river without a settled beginning. Its length is reported as anywhere from 6,275 to 6,992 kilometers. The Encyclopedia Britannica, after reviewing every claim, concluded simply that the final length of the river remains open to interpretation and continued debate. The greatest river on Earth cannot be measured, not because we lack the tools, but because we cannot agree on what the question means. And that, perhaps, is the Amazon's deepest truth. It resists completion. It resists the clean lines of a map, the certainty of a number, the comfort of a single answer. It is a system so vast, so interconnected, so layered with human and natural history that every attempt to contain it reveals only how much more there is to find. But the Amazon's resistance to being mapped may soon be tested by something no river can outrun.
For 65 million years,
The Amazon rainforest remained resilient to climatic variability. Ice ages came and went. Sea levels rose and fell. The forest adapted. It held. Now, for the first time in that 65 million year history, the system is losing resilience. A 2024 study in Nature found that more than 3/4 of the Amazon rainforest has been losing its ability to recover from disturbance since the early 2000s. The decline is fastest in areas with less rainfall and closer to human activity. 17% of the Amazon has already been lost to deforestation. A 2025 study warned that up to 38% of the forest area that existed in 1950 could be gone by the end of this century. By 2050, up to 47% of the remaining forest could face compounding stresses that push it past critical ecological thresholds. The mechanism is a feedback loop. Trees in the Amazon generate much of their own rainfall. Moisture evaporates from the canopy, rises, forms clouds, and falls again as rain. A cycle that keeps the forest wet enough to survive. Remove enough trees, and the cycle breaks. Less forest means less rain. Less rain means more trees die. More dead trees mean less rain. At some threshold, estimated between 20 and 25% total deforestation, the loop becomes self-reinforcing. The forest dries, it burns, it shifts to savanna, and it does not come back. The Amazon does not only sustain itself, it sustains a continent. The forest acts as a massive atmospheric pump. Trees draw water from the soil through their roots and release it from their leaves as vapor, a process called transpiration. A single large tree can release more than 1,000 liters of water into the atmosphere in a single day. Multiply that by 390 billion trees, and the result is a system that generates its own weather. Scientists call them flying rivers, currents of
atmospheric moisture that flow westward from the Atlantic,
pick up additional water from the forest canopy, and then turn south when they hit the Andes, carrying rain to Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, and the agricultural heartland of southern Brazil. The soy and cattle industries that drive much of the deforestation depend on rainfall that originates in the forest they are destroying. Without the flying rivers, the agricultural interior of South America dries. Hydroelectric dams lose their reservoirs. Cities of 20 million people face water rationing. The Amazon is not a local issue. It is the plumbing of a continent. In the territory of the Yanomami, one of the largest indigenous groups in the Amazon, spanning the border between Brazil and Venezuela, a different kind of destruction unfolds in real time. Illegal gold miners have invaded Yanomami land in waves since the 1980s. They use mercury to separate gold from sediment. The mercury enters the rivers.
Enters the fish.
It enters the people who eat the fish. Studies have found mercury levels in Yanomami communities far exceeding safe limits. Children show neurological damage. The rivers that sustained these communities for thousands of years have become poisonous. In late 2024, Brazil launched a military operation to clear illegal miners from the Munduruku indigenous territory in the heart of the Amazon. The operation displaced thousands of miners. Many returned within months. The southern Amazon has already crossed into unfamiliar territory. Dry seasons are longer. Soil moisture is lower. Tree mortality is higher than normal. In 2023, rivers that had never been known to run low dropped to record levels. In 2024, fires swept through regions that had rarely burned. The harpy eagle, the largest eagle in the Americas with a wingspan of 2 meters and talons the size of grizzly bear claws, nests only in the tallest emergent trees of undisturbed
Forest.
It needs vast, unbroken canopy to hunt. It raises a single chick every 2 to 3 years. Where the forest fragments, the harpy disappears. It cannot adapt to edges or clearings. It does not move to secondary growth. It simply goes. Its presence in a forest is proof that the forest is still whole. Its absence is a diagnosis. In Iquitos, Peru, the largest city on Earth that cannot be reached by road, more than 500,000 people live in a place where everything arrives by river or by air. The city sits on the upper Amazon, surrounded by forest so dense that no highway has ever been completed through it. Seasonal flooding makes permanent roads impossible. Iquitos was founded as a Jesuit mission in the 1750s. During the rubber boom, it became the last major port on the upper Amazon, the point where ocean-going ships could no longer navigate further upstream. Rubber was loaded here for the journey to Belém, and then to Liverpool, London, and New York. Today, the city sprawls along the riverbank in a chaos of floating houses, motorcycle taxis, and markets selling river fish the size of small children. The tambaqui, the paiche, the tucunare, Amazonian fish species that dwarf anything found in temperate rivers. The paiche alone can reach 3 meters in length and weigh 200 kilograms. Iquitos is a reminder that the Amazon still dictates the terms. You do not cross this basin on your schedule. You cross it on the rivers. At the mouth of the Amazon, 4,000 kilometers to the east, sits Belém, the gateway city, the place where the river meets the Atlantic. Its own opera house, the Teatro da Paz, was built during the same rubber boom that produced Manaus's Teatro. In 2025, Belém hosted COP30, the United Nations Climate Conference, a pointed choice of location, placing the world's negotiators at the doorstep of the ecosystem their decisions would most directly affect. The geoglyphs of the Brazilian state of Acre, enormous geometric earthworks visible only from the air, were first spotted in 1977 as deforestation cleared the canopy. Circles, squares, hexagons, and double-ring structures, some more than 300 meters across, dating from the 1st century CE to 1250 CE. They were not discovered by exploration, they were revealed by destruction. Further downstream, where the Amazon approaches the Atlantic, it passes through one more transformation. Twice a day, the ocean pushes back. The incoming tide sends a wall of water the Pororoca, surging upriver, a bore wave that can travel 13 kilometers inland, 3 to 4 meters high, loud enough to be heard long before it arrives. The river that could not be measured, that could not be sourced, that could not be mapped, is not even entirely a river at its end. It is part ocean. There is a country in the Amazon basin. There are 9 of them, in fact, and in each of them, the river means something different. In Brazil, it is the economic engine and the environmental conscience. In Peru, it is the source and the identity. In Colombia, it is the frontier and the hiding place. But the river does not belong to any of them. The Amazon predates every nation that claims it by millions of years. It predates every civilization that shaped it by tens of millions. It will be here after every border drawn around it has been redrawn. The question is, what will be left of it? No one knows when the Amazon will cross its tipping point, or whether it already has in parts of the south and east. No one knows how many of the 100 uncontacted groups in the forest will survive the next generation of road building and mining. No one knows whether the terra preta, the black earth made by millions of people now gone, will outlast the forest that grew above it. The only thing that is certain is that the Amazon has never been finished. Not by Father Fritz with his hand-drawn map. Not by Lauren McIntyre on the slopes of Nevado Mismi, not by satellites, GPS, or LIDAR. It remains, as it has always been, the last river no map has ever finished. If journeys like this one interest you, subscribe to the channel and join us for the next one. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.